Professor, you tweeted your way onto the show today when I saw your tweet describing your reaction to these charges. You said these are serious violations of tax law that really have to be prosecuted. Why?
Well, it's not really a fringe benefit case. Some of the spin and the expectation was it's like you give a company car to someone and, gee, they didn't really use it for work all the time. That's not what this is. This is kind of like if someone went to his or her boss and said, why don't you reduce my salary by $5,000 this month, but give me $5,000 in an envelope in cash and in unmarked bills? That's what this is. As the previous guests were saying, there's a fixed amount of compensation he's going to get, and then it's reduced so they don't have to report it. But he gets, in some cases, it was cash. In other cases, tuition. It's like buying a flat screen TV. It's really just a scheme to do sneaky off the books cash instead of reported income. So it has nothing to do really with fringe benefits. It's sort of, again, this is just the allegation in the indictment. It hasn't been proven, but it's about straight up fraud, keeping two sets of books. And you can't allow this. If that happens, then basically no one has to pay tax anymore. They just do silly things like have side arrangements and dual sets of books. So it's really a challenge to the tax system. And I don't see how prosecutors could not charge this. If you run across this, even if they aren't trying to get leverage on Weisselberg, like everyone's saying, if you come across this, not to charge it would be rather amazing.
And Tim O'Brien, the indictment is filled with unnamed characters and references to them. There's the unindicted co-conspirator, and then there's the references to others and other executives, other high-level executives. And so the candidates for liability here include Donald Trump's children, obviously include Donald Trump himself. Who's worried tonight as they read this indictment?
Anybody in the upper ranks of this very small organization who advised Donald Trump or participated in any of these scams alongside Allen Weisselberg. The Trump organization has scores of LLCs under its umbrella. I suspect the Trump Corporation is another one of these entities, and typically there weren't a lot of people at the top of that food chain. It was a company that existed on paper. It usually included Allen Weisselberg and some constellation of the three children. So to the extent that unindicted co-conspirator, number one, is someone in the Trump Corporation, and that mirrors other LLCs the Trump Organization typically constructs, it's possible the children are in danger there. I think the other issue will come on very soon with the weight of this indictment is people will start to rat one another out, possibly. I think that this is an organization, we've talked about this before, there's not a lot of loyalty. Everyone understands that Trump saves his skin before anyone else. And I think a chill probably went down the spines of people in senior ranks at the Trump Organization when they read this. I think a lot of the spin around this as being a frivolous suit without a lot of ammunition behind it got dispelled today. This is the very early stages of this investigation, and a lot of people could be caught up in its crossfire.
Professor Shaviro, Andrew Weissman just raised the question of what do federal prosecutors do today when they pick up this indictment and read it? And to be fair to them, the Manhattan prosecutors are the very first prosecutors who've had the tax returns of Donald Trump's company and Donald Trump to study for criminal behavior. So, of course, they would be the first ones to find it. But what they found includes a federal crime.
Yes. No, it's kind of funny because the New York State basis for the charge is that it's defrauding someone. So it could be that someone who's indicted under this statute defrauded you or defrauded me or defrauded someone else on the show. Instead, there was the federal government. So they find the New York State people find federal income tax fraud, which is undeniable if the facts of the indictment are proven. And it is kind of it's embarrassing for the feds, although, as you say, maybe they didn't have access to it. It seems to be stuff that once you look at enough documents, it's just right there, and there's no denying it. Again, if the indictment is provable, so yeah, I don't see how they can not charge on this basis.
And Tim, that's what's so striking about the indictment is that you can see how this case can be made so well because it is on paper. It is right there. And the man responsible for it all is sitting in the courtroom, Allen Weisselberg.
That's an important thing to remember about the entire sweep of this case, Lawrence. I don't think a special grand jury would have been convened and the DA's office targeted a former president if they didn't have a lot of other paperwork in their hands already that goes to some of these other possible crimes we've discussed: bank fraud, tax fraud, accounting fraud, falsification of business records. And Allen Weisselberg worked hand in glove with Donald Trump for decades, creating the kind of paperwork that company sent out to banks, other lenders, and the media to present this mirage around who Trump was. We deposed Donald Trump for 2 days in 2007, and that deposition is full of his acknowledgement that he and Weisselberg worked closely together on these kinds of issues.